from your end? I'm quite interested in why a fellow from Texas ends up heading up to Canada and joining the RCAF.
I graduated from, I got my BA from Texas University in 1938. And I'd intended to go off and involve myself in the Spanish Civil War. But unfortunately, by the time I was ready to go, my side had lost the Spanish Civil War and it was over. And then I just was very concerned about what was happening, what the Nazis were doing. Of course, America wasn't going to be in the war for another 2.5 or so years. And I felt so strongly about it that I decided I'd go up to Canada and enlist in the Canadian Air Force.
Did you come up on your own, or did you come up with any other fellows from?
I came just on my own.
I see.
I spent quite a few weeks traveling around the States and eating when I could and that sort of thing, and hitchhiked up to Canada. And by the time I arrived, I was quite underweight. And they said, well, we're glad that you want to join, but you're underweight. And I said, but surely if I want to be a pilot, the lighter you are, the better it is for flight. No, they said. So I went off and spent a month back in America, just eating as much as I could and so on. And after that, after 2 or 3 weeks, went back to Canada again. And when I'd weighed and was heavy enough, they all cheered.
Is that right?
One of the good things about it was that I was received in such a cordial way by the Canadians, who were delighted to have us volunteering and joining the force.
What did your parents think of you heading up to Canada?
Well, they were they were surprised, but on the whole, convinced that it was a good thing for me to be doing. That on the whole, we were all with the 411 Squadron when it was first formed, and there was a remarkable kind of relationship amongst all of us. We felt that we were actually not only getting into the war, but that also we had sort of formed the first a new Canadian squadron all on our own. I'd come back from I'd been in action over France and came back and landed, and there he was on my wingtip to greet me, and so we shook hands, and that was fine.
And what, other than like Don Blakesley and Arthur Cleveland and John McFarlane, were there many other Americans at the time you were with the RCAF? Were there many other Americans serving?
Those are about the only ones I remember. There were others, but in 411 Squadron, of course, was Don Blakesley and one or two others you mentioned. But
how'd you get along with Don Blakesley?
Very well.
What was your impression of Don Blakesley?
I was convinced he was a good pilot and was going to do well, and of course was very glad to hear after I'd been shot down and was out of the war that he went on and actually then rejoined the American Air Force.
Yeah. Now, having become a POW, had you not become a POW, do you think you would have transferred back to the U.S. force, or would you have stayed?
I don't think so. I think I would have stayed with the Canadian.
And your reason for that would be?
Well, just that by that time I'd become very attached to my fellow Canadian, my fellow Air Force officers who were Canadians and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, Of course, when I joined the Canadian Air Force, I lost my American citizenship.
Oh yeah, you
But
were
when you
early.
pledge allegiance to the King, then you cease being an American citizen. And I could have got back, become an American citizen again, but I was stationed at Hornchurch for my last year or so in action, and Hornchurch is just on the outskirts of London. And if flying was washed out, I could be in London in 30 minutes. And London was such a remarkable place during the war. And in fact, I became so attached to London that afterwards, when I was demobbed, I didn't go back to America. I stayed in England and became a British citizen.
And you feel that was because of you felt a connection to the country because of your wartime service?
Well, it was true, because I'll tell you something interesting that happened. World War II was very different from World War I, partly in the sense that in World War II, unlike World War I, there was definitely a right side and a wrong side. And also, a lot of the people in World War II were volunteers like me, not only from America, but also people who had escaped from Poland or France or any place else. Many of them joined up and also joined. There was a Czech squadron and all that sort of thing. And toward the end of the war, we had, in prison camp, we had regular sessions where when we talked about the kind of Britain we wanted to see after the war. And it mustn't be the Britain of the Depression and all that. And we had ideas about the kind of Britain we wanted to see, and we felt also that because of our involvement in the war and all that we're concerned, it gave us a right to say what kind of Britain we ought to have. And actually, I only learned afterwards that this was happening in the various services, even amongst the women's services, the Wrens and the WAFs and that sort of thing. And they were all thinking about, as I say, the kind of Britain that we wanted. And this was contributed to the fact that only 5 months after the end of the war, in an election, Churchill was defeated. And Churchill, we all had the greatest respect for Churchill as our war leader, but we didn't think that he was the right person to govern Britain in peacetime. And so this was part of the reason why I stayed on in Britain after the war, because I felt that I'd become kind of committed in a way and wanted to be here. And I didn't go back to Canada or back to Texas. I stayed in England.